Hello everyone and welcome back to another little podcast video. This one is again a school project for Mr. P. So he asked us to all pick out a book and then do a project on it or a book report. And one of the ways you could submit it is by doing a video. So like, oh absolutely, it's so much easier than writing, at least for me. But it couldn't just be any book, it had to be something that was useful to life. So from the catalog that he gave, I chose Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Mr. P had recommended the audiobook version of this, so that was easy for me. What I just did was during art class while I was painting or drawing, I would be listening to that in the background, so I could easily get it done while working on other things. And it was a pretty good book. I will start off by saying I would recommend it, but let's get into talking about it so you guys know exactly what we're dealing with here. So let's start off by talking what was the book about. Well, for those of you who don't know, David Goggins is a former U.S. Navy SEAL, an ultra-marathon runner. He also has wrote a few other books, I believe, and he's a motivational speaker, being on a couple podcasts. In the book, he talks about, this is like a summary of his life. He talks about some of his struggles that he had growing up, being poor and living in a troubled household, but using all of that and pushing himself. That was the big thing. The big thing this book talks about was pushing yourself past your limits so that you can achieve greater things. Something he references a ton is the 40% mindset, which is what he explains to be when you think you're done with something or you think you've pushed yourself to your limit, you've only actually done 40%, and you can tap into that 60% if you keep going. Quoted from him, "When your mind tells you that you are completely exhausted and can't continue, you've only completed 40% of what you're capable of doing." My biggest takeaway from this book, honestly, I think is the 40% rule. That's really motivating, that sometimes when you feel like you're done, you're not, and there's more you can push for. And I feel like I've experienced that before in my life too. I used to run back in middle school, and I would always get tired after doing like 100 meters or something. I know it's just like pretty bad, but when I was starting out, that was hard for me. But I would tell myself to keep pushing, or after like running 2 miles, sometimes when I got better, it'd be like, I know I can push further, and I would force myself to run just for a couple more seconds. But then if I kept telling myself that, sometimes I could add a whole extra mile to that. That's the 40% rule, and that is motivational. So how do I plan on incorporating this into my life? I actually, as I just gave some examples, I already use the 40% rule a ton, and I force myself to do that even just for schoolwork. Sometimes schoolwork gets really hard for me, and I feel like I'm kind of a bad procrastinator. But when I sit down and actually start doing something, I'll tell myself, like for this English essay that I'm working on right now, okay, I'll do one paragraph and then we'll stop. But I'll write that paragraph and be like, oh, but I've got some other ideas. Maybe just a little bit more and keep doing it. And then sometimes you can add in a whole other page. Anything like that. It is an incredibly useful skill to have in life. The 40% rule is beautiful. Did I like the book? I actually really did. It was enjoying to listen to, and I didn't have a bad narrator, so, like sometimes when you're listening to an audiobook, the narrator's bad, you don't like the book, but mine wasn't that bad, and I overall just did enjoy the book. I think it was really well written, it was down to earth, and told people that you need to push harder, which, it was good. It was just a great message. I did enjoy it. And as I've already stated, yes, I do feel like this book could definitely help me in life. I keep going back to the 40% rule, just because that's probably like the coolest thing that he talked about in that book, and something that I totally believe in. The 40% rule, I want to keep using it. I think it's perfect in almost any situation. Everyone should be trying to use it, even if you only go 45%. Push yourself just a little bit more, and you can just achieve things you never thought you could. It doesn't have to be anything physical related. Anything that you're doing, if you feel burnt out or tired, give it a little bit more just to get it done. The last question I have to answer is, you might be able to hear my cat purring in the background, so I apologize. There he is. But anyway, any other thoughts or opinions that I want to share? I would say, just straight off the bat, read this. It's a great book, especially for anybody who, likes physical activity or is really into running. This is a great book. He talks about some things about how he pushed himself to do like a 100-mile run, which is insane. Anything like that, though, if you're into motivational stuff, this is a great book. Even just in general, if you don't think it's a good book for you, maybe just check it out, read a couple pages. Even if it's not for you, see what you think of it. I wasn't totally sure how I was going to feel about it going into this, but I'm really glad that I did read this book. Absolutely recommend it. I would probably give this 4 out of 5 stars. I think it was that good. We're already at the 4.5 minute mark, so hopefully I answered all the questions I was supposed to. But yeah, I enjoyed this book. Go read it for yourself. This video cannot be longer than 5 minutes, so I don't really got much else to say, and I don't have a lot of time left anyway. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Make sure you check out this book, David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me.